bedtime. No matter how bad things got, the princess would always marry that heroic prince who had slain the dragon. They'd inherit some big castle and a peaceful kingdom and live happily ever after. In story after story after story. But it sure didn't take me long to realize that real life doesn't always work that way. You see, Grandma died when I was in 3rd grade. I didn't have anybody there to tell me bedtime stories anymore. And the next year, my parents got a divorce. It was a huge mess, fights, arguments, accusations. And when Dad walked out, he never called home again. Ever. So, Mom and I moved in with her many boyfriends. I lost count of how many of them there were, because none of them ever lasted very long. Then we moved in with this one guy who used to drink a lot. Well, at first, I'd just go to my bedroom and try to hide from him. But then, when I was 12 or so, he started following me in there. And those were the worst times of all. I remember one night he came in and he was so drunk that he held me on the ground and he put his cigarette out on my neck, and I just screamed and I screamed and I screamed, and Mom just stood there, watching. Grandma used to tell me that monsters aren't real, but they are. I know that because I used to live with one. So I started to wear the scarf around my neck to hide all those scars. All during that time, the kids at school were talking about me. I heard the words they used. Sometimes I didn't even know what they meant, but I had a pretty good idea. So, when I was 14, I ran away from everything. And I spent the next few years on the streets. Well, I mean, that's a hard life, right? A girl's got to eat. I mean, you have to survive. So, I sold everything I had. And then I sold the only thing I had left. Myself. One man after the next. But trust me, there was no love. Not from them. Not for them. The men used me and I used them, and love doesn't use people. That much I knew, because Grandma had loved me. All she ever did was give. Well, through it all, I never took off that scarf. But then, last October, that's when I met him. He was working in a soup kitchen I'd sometimes go to, and he handed me a plate of food. He wasn't like most of the men you'd meet on the streets. He was tall and smiled and looked at you as if what you had to say actually mattered. I had no idea what he wanted. Hard night? Those were the first words he said to me. And it did sound like he actually cared. I'm fine, I said, because I didn't need anybody feeling sorry for me. But he didn't quit. How much? He said. How much what? How much do you cost? I remember thinking, I thought maybe this one would be different, but I guess not. And I'll admit, I'm so disappointed. Depends, what do you have in mind? Well, I thought we could spend some time together. Yeah, well, how much time? All night. So I quoted him a price, and he nodded and he reached into his wallet and he pulled out the cash. Up front, it was more than I'd seen in 6 weeks. Got a place I usually go, I told him. He said, no, let's go to my place. So we left. He took my hand and started talking with me. Well, not to me or at me, but with me. He asked me about my childhood and my favorite bedtime stories as a kid. Then we got to this park and he asked me to swing. I don't remember the last time I had laughed like that. We just laughed as we kicked toward the stars, and then we kept walking. And we got to this grocery store. You like ice cream? He asked. What? Ice cream, do you like it? I don't know, I haven't had ice cream since I was a kid, he said. You're still a kid, he muttered. And at the time, I didn't know what he meant. But he bought a gallon of it, and we spent the night sitting on his couch, playing board games and eating chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. He bought me ice cream, can you believe it? Then it got late, and he led me upstairs, and I knew that time would come. There's a shower in there, he said, and he pointed toward a door. You can use it if you'd like, and I want to take you to breakfast in the morning. Is 8 o'clock all right? I just stared at him. He was telling me that he wasn't going to sleep with me. What kind of game are you trying to play? I asked. No game. Good night. And he went downstairs and he slept on the couch. Well, the next morning I did meet him for breakfast, and then he asked me to meet him that afternoon in the park to fly kites. If you need money, I'll pay you, he said. Just don't go back to the streets tonight. And I'll admit, I was tempted to, but I didn't. I mean, it was like I was learning to be a kid again. Like some secret part of me that had been buried beneath all this junk in my life was learning to breathe again. Is that what love feels like? Then the winters came. The snow started to fall. He came and he found me one night, and he asked me to dance. So we danced right there in the middle of the street as the snowflakes fell. Well, while we were dancing, my scarf pulled loose. I should have been more careful because that's when he noticed. You've got scars, he said. I looked down and I quickly put that scarf back around my neck. Yeah, I'm damaged merchandise, I said. I didn't mean to say it. It just sort of slipped out. It was a phrase that one of the men had used when I quoted him my price. I'm sure not paying that much for damaged merchandise, he said. But he took a step forward, and he pulled back the scarf, and he kissed my scars. He accepted me despite who I'd been, despite what I'd done, despite who I was. And even though it sounds unbelievable, I felt the scars disappear. They vanished. They faded from my heart. That's when I knew that I loved him. My heart broke that night, but not from sadness. His love broke me and set me free. I finally believed that it was possible to be loved. I'm so sorry, I told him. For what? He asked. For who I am, for what I've done. Stop, he said. I'm not ashamed of you. Don't you get it? I love you. And then he unwrapped my scarf and he tossed it in the snow. I guess that fairy tales really can come true. At least, if you believe.